Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I'm here with Ben Pickard, and we're asking you to consider whether or not you are charging enough for your services. So we go over some benchmarks and best practices for not only what your rates should be at your gym, but how to increase your rates over time in a way that is consistent and in line with your values. And so if you want to make sure that you are charging what you should be charging for your services and your rates are increasing appropriately over time, this is a great episode for you. So get your pen and paper ready and let's dive in. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm here with Mr. Ben today. Ben, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
Good, good. I feel like, it's maybe been a second since we've recorded. How's life for you these days?
Life's good. I'm one of the many people who's stoked that it's spring in Canada. As you know, me and my wife are finishing up a big bathroom, closet, primary bedroom renovation, which I'm really excited about. We're going to have heated floors, which is luxury as hell.
Wow, you fancy.
Real fancy pants.
And we've both been in renovation mode. You with bathroom and stuff at home. I'm renovating an apartment in New York City. And I think both of us are excited about it, but want it to be over.
Yeah, I like, as you know, you're kind of the same way. I like doing the work, but there comes a point when the work happens for 2 or 3 hours every second evening, it feels like it never makes any progress.
Yeah.
So it's I want a 24-hour period where I can just use tools and be done.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, you want a finish line in sight. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna send us those vibes that both of us wrap these projects up at some point. Yeah, we will. Well, before we dive into today's topic, let me just do a quick little shout out because many of you know on this podcast we're big fans of our friends over at Perform Better, not only for their equipment but also for their summits. And Perform Better has a few summits coming up in summer and in fall that you should all have on your calendar. Their summits are fantastic. I think they're world-class, best-in-class continuing education for gym owners. And they have one coming up in Chicago, June 12th to the 14th. They have one in Long Beach, July 17th to the 19th, and one in Providence, Rhode Island, August 14th to the 16th. So down below in the show notes will be links to all of those. We really recommend you all go. I mean, honestly, aside from coming to Unicorn Society retreats, which we think are the best on the planet, I put Perform Better right up there with us, alongside us as just some of the best ways you can spend your time and energy leveling up as a gym owner. It's a great community. They have great speakers, great interactive sessions. And so if you've never been to a Perform Better Summit, this is the year, my friend. Go put one or all of those summits on your calendar. And hopefully one of us on our team will see you there. Ben, before we move on, you've been to a bunch of Perform Better stuff. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've said this before on the podcast, but it's probably a year ago. The first time I ever met Mark was in the audience at a Thomas Plummer talk in Perform Better. I think it was Chicago. I remember I drove because I was in university and I had no money. So I'm like, I can either not go or I can drive. And
Right.
5 of us crammed into a little sedan, whole separate story. And I didn't know who he was. Just I was there to do some learning and some networking. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit in this crowd for 15 minutes in silence. I'm like, hi, I'm Ben. Nice to meet you. It's like, I'm Mark. And here we are. So even if you don't like any of the speakers and you don't think Perform Better has anything to offer, the fact that there's other awesome people like you in the room, that alone is absolutely worth it.
100%. Yeah, it's a great pitch. That's a great pitch. Great for networking, just feeling, getting to know the industry. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about today's topic. And today's topic is all about pricing. Really asking yourself the question, are you charging enough? And pricing is one of those things that I've learned from coaching at this point hundreds of gym owners that people have real hesitations and feelings and hangups about. Deciding what the value of your services is something that comes with a lot of layers of consideration. And some of those layers I'll just get the ball rolling here that I see is thinking about, okay, well, what are your rates compared to the rest of your market? What are your rates compared to what they've been in the past and what you've continued to charge? What are your rates compared to what you need to make to be profitable? What are your rates compared to what your trainers want to make per session to be happy? There's so many angles at which you can think about. And all of those perspectives are useful. Your rates for your services do have to be responsive to the market that you're in. Your rates do have to account for your overhead and give you enough room for profit, but also give a decent rate to your trainers, right? That all matters. And so I think because of that, people get hung up. And they also don't want to drastically make changes to rates because they don't want to piss off clients. So we want to just kind of talk in this podcast through all of that, through the jungle of price increases, the jungle of what to charge for certain services, give you some benchmarks, and talk about some best practices. Anything else you would layer on top of this conversation, Ben?
Only the layers of even more mud of saying what's a session with me worth as a trainer is really only a small step from what's my worth as a human being. And when you layer on the fact that we are not our clients, and we probably we might not need the best training because we spent, like, me as a client would need different things because I spent 15 years learning about fitness stuff.
Yep.
And the discrepancy between what trainers charge and there's this whole answering the question of what's my self-worth and would I buy this is just that's the only lens we have to see it through, but it's not the right lens.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, your value in the marketplace doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Yeah. We're not just worth what we feel we're worth. There's actually some other data that's useful to consider. And listen, I'll speak for myself, and not as a personal trainer, but as a coach and consultant, I want an hourly rate that feels good for my own self-worth. But my own self-worth is often calculated subconsciously or consciously by what I see around me. It's calculated by comparison. And so I think, comparison, we know, is sometimes the thief of joy, and sometimes comparison is a useful exercise. And so hopefully today, some of the benchmarks and things that we walk through with all of you gives you some helpful ways to compare what your rates are to some other benchmarks and best practices. So, Ben, let's walk through it. We have this tool that we give our Unicorn Society members, which we won't go through all of today. There's just one part of it we'll use, but we have this tool called the Big 5 Foundations of Financially Fit Gyms, which is an obnoxious title, but really, really useful.
I think you made it.
I know, it's partially my fault, I'm sure. But one of the things that we have as one of the Big 5 is make sure you're charging enough. And we have some benchmarks that came from real research that we've done and other people have done. So, Ben, do you just kind of want to walk through some benchmarks for what we think you should be charging for some key services?
Yeah, 100%. So first off, this is where the rubber is the road, friends. If you are offering one-on-one training, you probably, based on all of our research and gym owners we've talked to, should be charging somewhere between $75 and $200+ per session, which means the average client is probably paying $600 to $800 per month. And I'll go through them all, and then we'll give some color to them just so we don't get too hung up on one.
Yeah.
Small group training, probably 35 to 55 or more per session, which is about 300 to 500 or more per month. And if you're doing large group training, you're looking at $15 to $30 per person per session, or the 175 to 225 mark. Now, can I maybe start with a bit of context?
Yeah, please.
So we've obviously drawn nice, clear lines in the sand. What differentiates small group from large group? Is it 5.6 human beings? Is it 6.1 human beings? Should we measure humans in integers, not real numbers? Generally speaking, small group training is 4 to 6, maybe 8. But maybe you do 3, but you charge a little bit more. But it's a small group. Large group is kind of like boot camp style team training, F45, CrossFit-esque. And one-on-one is kind of one-on-one. So if you're, let me give an example. Someone doing 6-on-1 with non-customized programs, it's probably going to charge a little bit less per session than somebody doing 3-on-1 with fully custom programs that includes nutrition coaching. There's a reason we've got ranges in here. It's not like if you charge $34 per person for small group instead of $35, that doesn't mean you're doing anything fundamentally wrong. Yeah. These are really just ways to represent, based on what we've seen, these ranges are healthy for most businesses serving most clients in most areas, but you might not fit neatly into a most.
Yeah. And some of the ranges are huge, right? For example, if you're doing one-on-one personal training, there's a lot of you out there that still have that as your bread and butter, which is great. We are seeing a trend away from it towards small group in most of the gyms we work with. But one-on-one, the range for that is $75 to $200 per session, right? And I think, you're only getting a $200 per session in a place like New York or LA or, some big cities. Whereas $75 a session's, crazy low for places like that. So your market has a big influence on that. The amount, firstly, another consideration is the amount you like doing that service matters. So for many of you out there who have been doing one-on-one but want to move towards small group or large group, that's a reason to actually raise your rates, right? To de-incentivize people to buy that one-on-one training if you want to stop doing it, right? But that's a huge range because that's a service that we see across the board has the most variety in what people charge from market to market.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. And then in terms of small group training, let's just kind of pull this back. We said the average is about $45 per session, somewhere between 35 and 55. And it's also, a pretty decent range, but you'll notice that the rates kind of double as these services go up. So we're doing about 15 to 30 for large groups, so a class setting, right? 20 people or more. People are paying somewhere around 15, 20, 25 bucks for a session. It's almost double, close on to 45 to 50 with the small group. And then it doubles again to close to 100. So I think that's just, if there's any kind of rubric you take away from this, is that you really want, if you do more than one of these services, you want them to be that differentiated, right? Because I think one of the mistakes that people make when they do their pricing is their pricing is so similar and the service is so similar that clients can't tell the difference between a large group and a small group, right? They're like, well, your large groups only have like 10 or 12 people in it. Your small groups have 5 or 6 people in it. Why do I pay double for that? Why do I pay? So you really do need to differentiate your services. And ideally the rates are different enough to represent the kind of investment you and your team are making in that service. So I think that rough doubling from large group to small group to one-on-one is, I think, the right ballpark for many of you to consider. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a really simple way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I think those are some benchmarks. And like with all benchmarks, to your listeners, it's based on research, but it's also just a data point for you to consider. The other data point for you to consider is how much and how regularly you are raising your rates from year to year. And I know we talked about this a bunch on the podcast, but it's because it's real sticky. So Ben, you kind of walk through, what do you think the best practices are here for people to raise their rates?
Well, first, I think we should differentiate between a rate increase, like a price increase, and a price correction.
Great.
So the latter, a price correction, is when, through listening to this podcast or something else that happens, you realize, shit, I've been massively undercharging and I need to change my prices, sometimes quite dramatically. I'd say the cutoff for a price correction would be like 10% increase or more would typically fall under the correction category, where you're going to expect to lose a few clients out of it. Hopefully that's not that many, but if you don't make this change, your business is on a downward trajectory that you're not going to be able to get out from under.
Yeah. And just to jump in and say, most of you get in that place, and certainly at Mark Fisher Fitness, we got into this place by grandfathering old clients into rates, right? By saying, hey, founders who have been with us since the beginning, will never increase your rates, right? Or you just kind of forget to increase people's rates year after year after year. Then suddenly what happens has happened to us. For old timers that walked in the door, we were losing money every time they walked in the door. They were paying us less than we paid our trainers for those sessions, which is not the situation anyone wants to be in. So when you need to make that correction, it's because you waited too long to increase your prices or made promises that just weren't very sustainable. That's what we did. So that's the scenario that comes up the most there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And often it comes from a place of you're really wanting to do well by your clients. I don't want, the goal isn't to extract as much money as humanly possible from unsuspecting victims. That's not what we're doing here. It's
No.
Because we being trainers, want to make an awesome impact and deliver the best possible thing we can. And we usually have a belief that if we can charge a bit less, we'll make it more accessible for people, which is often true, but not always. We end up just trying to get people a deal so we can live our purpose, and we end up kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. So correction sometimes necessary. So if it's 10% or more, we think of that as a correction, and it just takes a little more time and a little more communication. Yeah. Is that what you would say?
100%. Same process, a little higher stakes, a little more time, a little more communication.
Yeah.
Hey there, Business Unicorns podcast listeners. I'm just making absolutely sure you have already gotten your free, instantly downloadable copy of my new book, The Little Book of Gym Marketing Secrets. You can find a link to download it in the show notes, or you can go to gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. I worked super hard to make sure this is a less than a 30-minute read and is a comprehensive overview of all the things you need to do to grow your gym, get more leads, more clients, and importantly, change more lives. Again, find the link in the show notes, where you can download your free copy at gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. And now back to the podcast.
Yeah.
Price increase, to answer your initial question. I think, very broad strokes, it's an annual increase of roughly 3 to 5% that roughly tracks inflation. And it's to cover, here's kind of the easiest example for this. My lease is 5 years. And so I pay the exact same rate for 5 years, give or take. Taxes, maintenance, insurance is what we call it in Canada, TMI. I don't know if it's the same in the States. And then usually there'll be a jump of like 10 to 30%. Last year for me, it was 20. So if I do nothing with my rates for 5 years, then I've got to, even just to cover my rent, arguably increase things 20%. Now all of a sudden, people are going to be shocked by a price correction. Yeah. But if I do a 3 to 5% every year, I'm doing nice little stare motions with my hands for people who listen to this on Spotify and Apple. It just makes it a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
Maybe you do a little bit more than inflation. Maybe you do a little bit less. Maybe you use that opportunity to kind of adjust some of your pricing to make them look a little bit different. I was talking to a friend about this. You don't literally have to just add 2.62% to whatever you charge, and you charge $102.62 up from $100. Like massage it into a nice round number, adjust your packaging prices of packaging a little bit. It's at the end of the day, it just needs to cost a little bit more, but it doesn't mean you just multiply everything by inflation.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. And I think your example there of like cumulative effect of not doing an increase just shoots yourself in the foot. And these days I've been saying, I think historically I've often said like 3 to 5%, but these days I've been saying 3 to 10%. I think some people can go all the way up to 8, 9, 10% increase because inflation is back in a big way. At least in the US, people obviously are feeling the pains of everything costing more. And with our current tariff wars, I'm not sure that's going to get better before it gets worse. Not to get political, that's just the reality of everything's going to cost a little more for a little while, it seems. And so I think it's something to care about. And I think when you do it right, and when we do it right, I mean that you at the same time every year send out communication that you have an annual increase. It's usually maybe 1 or 2 emails. It's somewhere between 3 and 10%. No one bats an eye at that. It makes a huge difference for you as a business. And for each person, each client, it's a handful of dollars every month, right? It's a cost of an extra lunch once a month for them to get this increase. And so for most of them, it's not that big a deal. And I'll say this, the other thing that I find really compelling when I talk to folks about doing a rate increase is that just reminding all of you that everyone wants more money from you every year. Right? As Ben said, your landlord wants more money from you. Everyone on your team wants more money from you, right? All your vendors that you buy things from are going to want more money from you, not just because of inflation, but for all kinds of reasons. And so every year you decide to not increase your rates, you're just deciding to lower your profit margin. When you don't do that, it just comes out of your pocket as an owner. And maybe some of you are okay with that for a few years. Yeah, that's a decision you get to make. But I want you all to make it consciously. Right? To not by default, just, forget to do a price increase or feel uncomfortable about it and sweep it under the rug. And like subconsciously, what you're doing is you're deciding to make less money. And, Ben and I know how hard you all work to run your gyms. And the last thing you want from year to year is make less money as you grow. Yeah. As you take on more and more clients, more responsibility, more staff, the last thing any of you want is to make less money for that more effort from year to year. And so when you don't do a price increase, you're just taking money out of your pocket as an owner. And if you're going to do that, do it consciously and talk to us first so we can talk you out of it.
Yeah. This isn't ubiquitous, but it does come across from a lot of people that it's this, sometimes there's an association that money is evil. Mm-hmm. So I just want to lovingly challenge, and podcast might not be the platform for this, but we're going to try. If there's a belief inside that's like, well, I will just take a little bit less because I will carry the burden of my gym and I'm doing the service for humanity. We're not saying it's only about the money and you need to be paid millions of dollars every year for your service. So you should, do something that would give you that. It's about value. Money's just the way that most countries express value.
Yeah.
It's the myth we made up to have an exchange of goods and services, and making less doesn't make you a better trainer, and making more doesn't make you a better trainer. It's just are you truly happy with that? And are you truly being conscious about what you want? Because at some point that, dear gym owner making $3,200 a month, working 80 hours a week with a ton of risk and overhead, is that going to feed your family?
Yeah.
Maybe it does. I can take your kid to school. You're going to go on that vacation. Are you going to burn out? I see that money is just the tool we have to make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing. When you get that big repair bill for the air conditioner at your gym, you've got a few $1,000s sitting aside, not shit. I guess we're going out of business now. because that's how you don't make an impact, is go out of business.
For sure. Yeah, your impact stops when the business closes, right? Yeah, I think it's really well said, Ben. And I think that's, I think the fitness industry, because it's a service-oriented profession, right? We are helping professionals, right? Helping people with a service that we offer face-to-face. It's intimate, it's in person, it's personal. That kind of industry, this kind of industry, attracts a kind of person who tends to be a little selfless from time to time. That's not a bad thing. We need people in helping professions who put others first. And this is an area when it comes to paying yourself where I want to lovingly encourage you to not always put yourself last, right? You might not be first, right? You might prioritize a raise for your team over you, or you might prioritize that extra enhancement to your physical space with the new flooring or the new paint over a raise for you. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is you systematically putting yourself last financially and never doing this rate increase because you're going to be some hero to somebody, right? And I think it's that it turns into a form of martyrdom at some point, right? Where it's like you're not actually helping anyone if you can't pay your bills. If you don't have financial freedom of some kind, then you can't take the risk that it is to continue to be a small business owner, because there is risk involved. Right. So taking money out of the business and being financially secure as an owner is actually a really helpful thing to your ability to continue helping people, right? Yeah.
I was just thinking too, like if you genuinely don't need to make more and you're making a conscious choice, like still raise your rates, because otherwise your rent or whatever is going to go up, and just donate the difference that you make to charity.
Sure.
It's still a bigger impact than not charging your clients 3% more that they probably won't even notice. And like, I cannot stress enough, when we send out rate increase emails, we do them every October. We let them know in August. There's a system. Out of 100 something clients, like 2 people respond to the email.
Yes.
One of them is like, sounds good. And the other one is like, can you confirm something for me?
Yep.
I don't think we've ever had anyone quit over a rate increase.
I'll say this. Since we started this, I've always asked this question. Since we started Business of Unicorns, and I've been coaching gym owners, I've always asked when someone does a rate increase and I say, do you get any pushback? They said, no, not much. I was like, do you get more than 1% of your clients pushing back? The answer 100% of the time is no. I've never known a single gym owner who's done a rate increase that has had more than 1% of their members reach out with any sort of negativity or pushback at all. When it comes to price corrections, as Ben mentioned before, above 10%, even 15, 20, 30%, when you're really changing things a big deal, that's a whole different ballgame, right? You're really charging people a lot more in those given months, and I expect more pushback. But usually hopefully it doesn't happen very often. It's like a once in a while kind of correction, and we would expect more pushback from that. But 3, 5, 10% increase, people barely even notice most of the time. Makes a small difference to them, big difference to your business. Yeah. Any final thoughts here, Ben, as we kind of wrap up talking about, are you charging enough for your rates? Anything else that you want listeners to keep in mind?
The last thing, in just kind of broad strokes, is when you do set your rates and pricing and packaging, don't have a million options.
Yeah.
Have less. Now, that doesn't mean have one, because Pete talked about this at our Toronto retreat, and I thought it was really cool. Just a way of framing it. If I ask you, hey, would you like this lip chap? Because I just have a lip chap in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
The answer by default is yes or no. It's always 2. So then the person is really comparing buying the lip chap or buying your training services to not buying it.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, hey, Michael, based on what you told me, blah, 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 I recommend 2 or 3 days a week, which is best for you. Now you're comparing 2 days a week to 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So something about having the right number of pricing options and communicate them effectively and clearly, rather than we have once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, but then we have a 3-month, a 6 months, and a 12-month agreement. But then we also sell a 5-pack or a 6-pack, a 12-pack, and a 24-pack.
And a cancel any time.
You can also add this other thing on. And I'm being sarcastic here, but that's not abnormal. And my gym used to be the same.
Yes.
We've cut probably half of our pricing options from what we do as a whole. And we only show people 3 pricing options at a time. Yeah. And we've talked about this on the podcast. I'm showing them our most popular ones that are probably best for them because they fit the avatar. If you're 50 plus with 2 kids and a bad knee, I kind of know what you're going to do with us, because that's what 98% of other people do with us. So when you're building this out, try to make like nice round numbers, like $97 a session or $97 a month looks a lot better than 101. Don't have 100 packages. Like, do remember the confuse, you lose. The nicest We went to this fancy restaurant in Guelph years ago. It's called La Cucina. If you ever come to Guelph, La Cucina is good
We're
stuff.
going.
It's good. And the server doesn't have they have a menu, but not really. He comes over and it's like, and he's like, what would you like to drink? And I'm like, what beers do you have? And his answer to my question of what beers do you have, he's like, what beers do you like?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I like light lagers, blah, blah, blah. But open to trying something different. And he's like, how about this? I'm like, sounds great.
Yeah.
He turned it instead of giving me a list of beers, which is usually like 100.
Yep.
He turned it back to me like, what do you enjoy? Hey, what would you prefer? I'd like this. Great, we have that. Problem solved. Yeah. And it's something about that with our pricing and packaging in gyms that goes a long way, rather than us trying to build the perfect program for the hypothetical client who may or may not have come.
Yeah, I think it's a great story and a great analogy, right? Is that we want our pricing packages to be simple. We know that when you confuse, you lose, and having some shorter options that we can then turn into prescriptions for people and give them a choice between one or two things we think is the best fit for them is much better than sending them this big laundry list of options. So I think it's a really super smart. I think it's a great kind of note to end on. But I do want to circle back to something that's slightly off topic because you did something very Canadian. You called it lip chap.
What do you call it?
We always have these moments, like once a month, there's some Canadian ass thing that Ben does. And I'm like, hold on a second. You guys call it lip chap. We call it chapstick, which is like a brand name, but that's like our name for it. Like Kleenex is like tissues, but we call it like by the brand name, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, chapstick.
It's technically a lip balm.
Lip balm. We do say lip balm, but we would say, I think most Americans in the comments, wherever you're listening to this, sound off on the most important topic for today. What do you call it? I think most Americans call it chapstick, which is, I think, a brand of lip balm, but it's like the most popular one. So I think that's what we mostly call it. I've never heard anyone say, what do you call it? Lip chap?
Lip chap.
I've never heard that before in my life. It makes perfect sense. I think we just use the words in different order.
Yeah.
I love it. It was such a good story, but I had to circle back. So I'm like, I bet all the Americans listening are like, what did he call it?
I made a reference to Timmy's years ago, Tim Hortons, the coffee cup. And someone after was like, this was before Tim Hortons was in the States.
Yeah.
And someone was like, nobody in the audience knows what Tim Hortons is. Like, shit.
You're like talking about Timmy's, like everyone knows Timmy's, and you're like,
there's like 50 Timmy's. Like, you can't go anywhere.
Yes.
Like, there is an abundance of shitty coffee everywhere in Canada.
Yeah.
There's also good coffee, but it's like, oh, right, it's just so normal. Of course, 100%. For me, it's a toque. Can you guys call it a beanie? I'm like, what the fuck is a beanie?
Yeah, you said toque before. It was like a year or two ago. And I was like, what is this toque shit you're talking about? Like a beanie. I was like, wow, we have different words. I love it. See, listen to this podcast. This podcast is so multicultural. International podcast. All right, my friend. Well, thanks for this great conversation. This was I think super useful. And I think for all you out there thinking about your rates, hopefully you got something out of this. Also, quick reminder that there are a bunch of those Perform Better summits coming up in June and July and August in Chicago, Long Beach, and Providence. So click down below in the show notes to learn more. And hopefully you see someone from the Business of Unicorns team or community there. We'd love to see you. Thanks, Ben. See you on the next one.
Thank you.